Welcome to this edition of the Locker Room Chat, brought to you by the Shanneman Sports Museum of Tacoma Pierce County and Rainier Asphalt and Concrete, the #1 asphalt and concrete repair contractor in the Tacoma and Seattle area. For quality workmanship and top-notch customer service, contact Rainier Asphalt and Concrete at www.rainierasphalt.com. Let them know you heard about them on the Locker Room Chat. Today from the vault, we are pleased to share with you an interview conducted by Doug MacArthur in 2010 with Marv Harshman, a star football player at Pacific Lutheran College and the Tacoma Indians pro football team, and one of the nation's most respected college basketball coaches. Harsh coached at Pacific Lutheran College, Washington State University, and the University of Washington, and was inducted into the College Coaches Hall of Fame in 1985.
Harsh, tell me a little bit about why PLC when you were at Lake Stevens High School?
Well, it was an odd circumstance. I graduated from high school in '35, and I was 16 years old. And I had a scholarship to Washington State and to Washington in football. So my high school coach was from Washington State, and I went over with him and worked over there in the summertime, and until he was there for a 6-week course. And then I stayed, and I got so homesick that I just quit my job and came home again. I thought that was too far away. I'd never been out at Lake Stevens except to Everett, And so Jimmy Phelan, the coach from Seattle, from Washington, came up and talked to me again and asked me to come there. And he gave me what was a scholarship then, which was tuition, and then a job for meals. I washed pots and pans in a fraternity to get my meals, and then I had to pay for an apartment, or I roomed with 2 other guys from Lake Stevens that were older, and I lasted a quarter. I played frosh football, and we started turning out for basketball before the quarter was over, and I made the squad in basketball. And then I didn't have any money to keep myself, so I quit, and I went into CCCs for a year, and then I started to work in a warehouse or in a mill, and so I was older then, and we played PLU in a Christmas basketball game at the Y. AAU team. In fact, Stan Bates, who was coaching Snohomish and played at UPS, we played on the same team. And but PLU beat us, and the guy that beat us was Sigerson right at the buzzer. And I got thinking about, and Central and Eastern and some of those schools wanted me to come, but I would have had to, they wanted me to go to summer school so that I'd be eligible for football. Because the first year I went to PLU, I couldn't play football because I had played frosh football at Washington. So Cliff talked to me at that time after that game about coming there. And then Bob Tomervik, Marv's older brother, we had played against each other, and Ernie Peralta, another little kid from Everett that I had played against in games, and they said, "Why don't you come to town at PLU?" But they didn't have any scholarships, but you could weed the greens in the golf course for 10 cents an hour. That was a job. So, but there were 6 of us guys. There was an old house down by the golf course then, and it had electricity inside, but it didn't have running water. So we had a little wire fence around, and they had a tap outside, and we hung our toothbrushes outside. I can remember that. But we lived there for 2 years. So it didn't cost us anything and we brought most of the food from home. So that was.
In that decision to go to PLC, where does Cliff Olson fit into the puzzle, and how about Marv Tomervik? Did you know him before you went to PLC?
I didn't know Marv. I knew his brother Bob when he was down there, and Marv came at that same year, because he was younger than I was a couple of years, and but I'll tell you, he was an athlete that I've always said many times, I've never seen a passer as good as he was. He could do things that I've seen him. He had the knack of knowing where the defense was, and just about the time the guy was going to hit him from the blind side, he'd make that reverse pivot, and he'd be out of there, leaving the guy alone, and he'd be going to his left, and I've seen him throw the ball 60 yards back to the right. He was so strong. You know, his dad, they had a little dairy, and he had milked cows his whole life, and he was so strong in his arms and hands. He just, and Cliff was like, for example, he was all football. He coached basketball, and he loved basketball, but he didn't know anything about basketball. But he knew something about people. I think the strength of Cliff was that he recognized the things that individuals did best, and then he worked on that. In fact, we would have a scrimmage only 2 weeks tackling at the start, because we only had about 20 guys turning out at the first couple of years until we started having a little recognition. And so we would then, the line would block and set, but we would play touch, and then guys just would, you were going to get touched and you'd lateral the ball, and Cliff would make a play out of it. And then, so pretty soon we had a pretty good thing, and our strength was the passing game. It opened up some for running, but without passing, because our center was 165 pounds. I weighed more than the tackles the first 2 years of that team. So we just had to outscore people. We would sit down in that house at night and talk about who we were going to play, like Eastern and all us, like really big guys, and we'd say, well, we're going to have to score 5 touchdowns to beat them guys. And that'd be about what it was. But we could score because Tamervik, and then we had Platt and Sigurds, and the two ends who were also basketball players had great hands, and had, you know, I always, in fact, when I was coaching football at the end, I even took Curtis and another basketball player and got them to play defensive backs for the pass defense, because the reaction time in basketball is so much quicker, and they were they hardly ever let them have a completed pass in my last year of coaching football because of those two guys. And so that's the way kind of Cliff was. You know, he saw the limitations of size and strength and that, and knew he couldn't win that way, so he became more taking the initiative and made more things to help us win.
Harsh, you won 13 letters in college in 4 sports. So I know about your football and basketball. What else did you play?
Well, we had baseball the first year, and Tamervik was sensational in baseball. He played shortstop, I played third base. I think he got more boils at third base than I did. but his arm was so strong. And then in track, I threw the javelin. We didn't have track in high school, so, and I tried to high jump a little bit, and I jumped 6 feet in scissors, you know, which nowadays was. And then I even ran the 220 a couple of times. My brother Stur was a sprinter, and he was a very good one, and he could run the sprints, and so I just liked to, I don't know, we didn't have track really in high school, so, but we used to take a pole, cut a little small tree, and have a pole vault up at Lake Stevens, and we never got over 10 feet, I don't think, but we saw people pole vaulting, so we always tried to do things. And that, of course, in the Depression time, you made your own fun, and that's kind of what led me into more sports, I think.
Let's talk a little bit about football at PLC. You had great success, your teams had great success, and it culminated with one of the great games in Tacoma's history in Stadium Bowl against Gonzaga. Tell us a little bit about that season and the game.
Well, we got to the point, I think, in that year, by junior year, that we felt that we could beat anything, any of the teams that we were going to play, and we knew that Gonzaga was good, and they had the Gray Ghost, Canadeo, fortunately for us, unfortunately for them, he went out of the game in the first half. And it was a legal game. In fact, I was one of the tacklers, one of the ends, and one of them got him from each side and put him out of the game. I don't know if it was his leg or what. I don't remember that part, but so that took a big part of their offense away, because they were ahead 13-0 in the first half because of him. And then just before the half, we ran one of the plays that Cliff had made up after, which we did during the week, and we would let the tackle come through, and our tackle would double team to make a hole. I would block him momentarily and then go past him, and Tomervik would just throw the ball over him as he got there. The wingback, who was my brother, would block the linebacker at the same time, and then Blair Taylor, who was the quarterback, would go outside, and we'd get the halfback between us. And I had the ball yet, and when he came to take me, I lateraled it to Blair, and he went all the way, and that was the score just before halftime. So, and then later on, Sigerson made a great catch in the end zone and to tie it, and it said I had never tried a field goal in a game, but we did kick field goals over tree boughs before we practiced. And Cliff he was the kicker, and he would always get us out early there. And so I had tried kicking, but I had never kicked one in a game. And so, well, I guess that's a lie, I guess. I think back in high school, senior year, they had a postseason game in the county to raise money for the milk fund in 35, and they split up the different high schools, and they had a north-south game. And and Stan Bates was coaching in the South, and I was on the team. And at the end of the game, we got down about, I don't know, 20-yard line maybe, and the game was going to be over. And he said, "Kick a field goal." I kicked off so that he knew I could kick, and I kicked, and it hit the crossbar and came back out. And when I was at this PLU game, that's what I thought about. I said, "Oh, I'll probably hit it." But I happened to kick it good, and it went clear over the backstop, and it went down on the track. And I think Mark has the ball now. The little boy found it and brought it back to Cliff. And before Cliff passed away, he gave it to me. So.
Let's switch to the University of Pacific and Amos Alonzo Stagg. Had you any idea at that time that you'd be playing against such a legend?
No, we didn't know until Cliff kind of tied us into it. And then they had beaten USC that year. And so we knew they were good, but I didn't get to play. All I did was get to be on the field at the kickoff. I had wrecked my leg in the last game of the season, and I'd been out of playing and not practicing. So all I did is go and hold the ball in the kickoff, and then got back in the car that they had there sitting next to me. So but it was a really a physical game. They were more of a running team, power team, and they made quite a bit of yardage, but we were able to hit. I think it was 13-7 or something was the score, and it was a really to me one of the toughest games probably that PLU ever played, because and before that I was recouping at Dorothy's mother, my wife's future wife's house. I just got out of the hospital, and they were letting me stay there because her mother was a nurse, and so Cliff brought him there to see me before the day before, when they came in to play us the next day, and so I had about an hour he spent there with talking about football and stuff. So I was really thrilled about that part of it.
The Marvelous Marvs were the guys who grabbed all the headlines in that era, but you had a couple of guys named Sigurdsson and Platt, who I think were Marv Tomarovic's favorite targets.
We had, and Cliff made special plays for both of them. We had Platt and a Platt, Platt and a Platt, and he was a right end, but the flat he went in would be the left. He'd go behind the line. We had a play where everybody would go to the right, and Marv would run behind him. You know, Marv was a tailback. He wasn't a quarterback. In fact, I called signals all the time. Every team I ever played on, I called signals. But that's why when I'd tell the guys, get the ball down close to the goal line, I'll take it over. So 2 years I was the leading scorer at the coast because I got to make all the touchdowns. Earl was not as athletic. He was more physical, and the greatest catch I ever seen he make was for about 23 yards. He got knocked down as the ball was coming, and as he was falling, the ball was going down, and he closed his knees, and he caught it between his knees, and his knees were up, and it was a legal catch. And Platt was more of a, he was the guy that I would, you know, I was the fullback, but we'd do the spins and go up to the line and a little jump over, and then a short pass, he would be the, so he caught more passes probably than Sig did because they're shorter, but Sig could always get clear. We'd come back to huddle, and we had 3 pass plays, but then the guys would come back, and they'd say, "Give me a little time and throw it in the corner," or you know, they'd tell Marv where to go, and they'd be there. And I've seen Sig in the end zone, sliding on his stomach, catch a touchdown one-handed, underhand. He had the greatest hands. In fact, that's one of the reasons when we played them in basketball, the last goal, he was knocked to the floor and he was laying there, and the rebound just came down to him. He just flipped it up off the board and it went in, and they won by 1 point. And that's one of the reasons in my mind, I thought, hey, that would be a pretty good bunch of guys to go play with. And so and you know, he was the only athlete at that time that went to the major football in New York and played there when before he came out and played back with Tacoma, and I think a little bit afterwards too. But then his knees went, and that shortened his time. He was, you know, I think I always felt that he was the best all-around athlete. All he played in high school was basketball. He was all-city basketball at Ballard. He played football, of course, for us. He could play baseball. He could play tennis. He would. He would play golf. He had never played golf till he got to PLU. He made the golf team. I can remember we were up having the track meet at the league track meet at Western one year, I think it's junior year, and he had been playing golf, and that had been Friday and Saturday morning, and he came out to watch the track meet. We didn't have anybody running a quarter mile. He ran it in tennis shoes and was third, but he never ran it again. He was just about died.
After college, you may be one of the few people locally to play professional football and basketball in Tacoma with the Tacoma Indians and the Tacoma Mountaineers. Tell us a little bit about those two teams and your experience.
They started that football league, and I was going. Marv and I were both going to the U for our first year to get a master's, and so we decided we could make the team, and we went to turn out. Cliff encouraged us, and Al Davies was from Tacoma, the owner, and so they offered us some money, a little more. In fact, I had been drafted before my senior year by the Chicago Cardinals, which became the St. Louis Cardinals, because during the war they moved. And Tomarevic had been by Philadelphia. And that draft, they still had our rights. But then the American Football League started up right at the same time. And one of the old guys, I can't remember, one of the famous old-time coaches from the East was coaching the New York team. And they offered Marv and I $7,500 each to come and play. And Cliff got Al Davies, who he's a friend of, to offer us $9,500 to play for Tacoma. And then, the league was really a good league, because we had San Diego, Hollywood, L.A., Sacramento, Salt Lake, Oakland, and San Francisco, and Honolulu and Seattle, Tacoma. And so the next year it didn't go, I think, because there wasn't a lot of money in the owners, but the fact that the NFL came out and put a franchise in San Diego and LA and San Francisco area, and that just really took the heart out of the league, and that's why they got out of it, I'm sure. But it was a fun league, because it was two divisions, and you played all the teams once, and your division you played home and home. And so and Honolulu never traveled, so everybody went and played 2 games in Honolulu. And so, and the funny thing, we had gone down, we won our division, the Northern Division, and we had beaten LA, and after playing LA, we were going to go right from there to Honolulu. And so we got on the plane, and we got about, I'd say 40% out, and one of the engines went out. And we were closer to San Francisco than any other place. But San Francisco didn't have an airport, but Oakland did. So we went into Oakland, and we thought, well, they have to get a new engine. So they put us up at a little hotel there by that lake in Oakland, and we were going to go over to San Francisco. Well, there was no bridge then. You had to take a ferry. And before we got ready to go, they found out that they had an engine there, so we got called up again. We don't go anyplace, because we were going to go back out there and leave. Well, we had this, I wish I could, he was a fullback at Washington, but he was so scared of flying that he'd had drunk a fifth of whiskey right straight down, and the guys carried him on board to get him to go. We won our first game over in Honolulu, but then we had a luau for 2 days after that, and so we didn't play very well the next weekend. So.
This concludes part one of the interview with Marv Harshman. Check back on the locker room chat for when part two will be available. That concludes today's presentation on behalf of Rainier Asphalt and Concrete and the Shannon Sports Museum of Tacoma, Pierce County. I'm Steve Thomas. We thank you for joining us on another edition of the Locker Room Chat.